The United States economy. Everything seems to be going great. The stock market's at an all-time high. The Federal Reserve's inflation strategy seems to be working, and Arby's just released steak nuggets. On the surface, life is good. But underneath, there's trouble brewing. Because while everyone's busy debating the next interest rate cut or whether Tucker Carlson wears a toupee, there's a credit crisis bubbling that nobody seems to be talking about. And while the United States government is blowing through cash faster than a bachelor party at 2 a.m. in Miami, that's not even the real issue. The real issue is that the rest of America is looking at this reckless spending and saying,
"Hey, that looks kind of fun."
And because of this, the United States now has record high levels of household debt, mortgage debt, auto debt, student loan debt, and credit card debt. Moral of the story, Americans are drowning in debt. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you that the so-called growth everyone's bragging about is really just fueled by a consumer debt crisis that's been building right under everyone's nose. Let's zoom all the way out first. The United States now has more debt than any nation in human history. And the national debt has officially crossed $38 trillion. And borrowing isn't free. We now spend $1 trillion a year just to service the interest on that debt. That means the United States is spending more on interest than we are on national defense, income security programs, and veterans benefits. Interest has become the fastest growing expense in the entire federal budget, rising by over 34% in just the last 2 years. Translation? We're shelling out $1 trillion a year just to keep the lights on and the debt collectors off our front lawn. And here's where it gets worse. The rest of America is following the same playbook. Because if Uncle Sam can max out every card he owns, why shouldn't everyone else? And that's exactly what's happening. The average American now carries over $90,000 in personal debt. And total household debt in the United States, which measures debt at a more personal level, has exploded 60% over the last decade, reaching $18.6 trillion, the highest level ever recorded. So while the government's piling up debt at the national level, the rest of the country's quietly drowning at the household level. Debt has become the duct tape holding the entire economy together. And have you ever heard of the Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Well, this same concept can be applied to debt. Because when you actually look closer, not all debt is created equal. There's good debt, there's bad debt, and then there's ugly debt. When you look at how the New York Fed categorizes total household debt in the United States, everything falls into two main buckets: housing debt and non-housing debt. And it's only right to start with the good debt, housing debt. Housing debt is then split even further into two categories: mortgage accounts and home equity revolving accounts. Let's get the main one out of the way first: mortgage accounts. These include every type of long-term home loan, from first mortgages to refinancing to home equity installment loans. They're what the Fed calls closed-end loans, which essentially means you get a chunk of money up front, make monthly payments with interest, and once it's paid off, the account's closed for good. In simple English, it's the giant soul-crushing debt you take on for the privilege of owning 4 walls and a roof. And make no mistake, mortgage balances in the United States are massive. They actually make up the bulk of not just housing debt, but total household debt in America. Total mortgage balances have reached a record $13 trillion, the highest level ever recorded. Now onto the other type of housing debt, home equity revolving accounts. These are also called a home equity line of credit, and are essentially just a credit card for your house. You leverage your home's equity, pay back what you used, and then tell yourself it's an investment since it's technically linked to your house.
It was an investment!
And while home equity line of credit balances have jumped more than 30% since 2021, which marks the fastest rise since before the 2008 financial crisis, the overall total remains modest, at roughly $411 billion. So while the overall trend is eyebrow-raising, it's not something that demands immediate concern. So if housing debt is the good older brother in the family, then that raises the question, what's on the other side of things? And that would be non-housing debt. This is the problem child. Non-housing debt is split into 4 categories: student debt, auto debt, credit card debt, and other. But auto loans in the catch-all other bucket are holding steady for now, so we'll save those for another day. However, the same can't be said for the other 2, student loan debt and credit card debt. Next on the list we have student loan debt. America's favorite rite of passage into adulthood and anxiety. And over the past few decades, the cost to go to college has skyrocketed. Why? Because when you combine the ability for 18-year-olds to borrow thousands of dollars with no credit history, no collateral, and no financial literacy, you get a system where colleges can charge whatever price they want. And they do. Since 1983, college tuition has skyrocketed more than 700%, which far outpaces inflation, housing costs, and wages. It's the same cycle over and over. Every year, universities raise tuition, students take on more loans, and student debt grows. And because of this, there's now $1.7 trillion in total student loan balances, which marks the highest level recorded in history. Student loan debt now represents roughly 9% of all household debt in America, and about 44 million Americans still owe money on their education, with an average amount owed of $37,000. And this isn't even what's scary. Data is starting to show delinquencies on this debt are climbing sharply. A year ago, less than 1% of borrowers were in serious delinquency, meaning 90 days or more late on what they owed. Now, that number has risen past 9%. And the worst part? Unlike a mortgage or an auto loan that's secured and has collateral attached, with a student loan, you can't just sell your degree when things go bad. And here's a fun fact for you. Student debt is one of the few types of debt that typically doesn't get discharged when you file bankruptcy. Student loans are the herpes of the finance world. They never really go away. Now to where it gets ugly, credit card debt. And to say it's just ugly would still be a massive understatement, because it's not just ugly, it's dangerous. Credit card balances in the United States have now crossed $1 trillion, which is once again the highest level recorded in history. And credit card debt has risen by more than half since 2020. To add some more context, Americans have added more credit card debt in the last 4 years than they did in the entire decade following the 2008 financial crisis. And we're not just swiping like lunatics, we're also opening accounts like there's no tomorrow. The number of active credit card accounts has risen 20% from levels seen before the pandemic, and now exceeds 600 million. And with roughly 340 million individuals in the United States, that means the average American is managing several cards, several monthly payments, and several financial headaches. And here's where things start to fall apart. Credit card delinquencies are rising fast. The share of credit card accounts in serious delinquency has now climbed above 12%, which marks the highest level since the 2008 financial crisis. And it's not hard to see why. Over the last few years, inflation has soared, housing costs have reached record highs, and wages haven't come close to keeping up. And here's the cherry on top. The average interest rate on credit cards is now more than 21%, once again hovering around the highest level ever recorded. So that means the 12% of credit card users who are already delinquent aren't just behind. They're likely drowning in compound interest. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more chaotic, a new force arrived on the scene. You've probably seen the buttons. Buy now and pay over time with Affirm. Pay in 4 installments with Klarna, and whatever other soft-colored slogans Silicon Valley could dream up to convince individuals that borrowing money is a form of financial empowerment. But here's the truth. This concept isn't innovation. It's a marketing makeover, and it's credit disguised as convenience. It's a shiny new way to train an entire generation to normalize debt. In fact, a recent study found that 15% of all Americans use Buy Now Pay Later in 2024, with 40% of them regretting it after realizing the total costs. And even worse, 24% of these users have made a late payment, which is up from 18% in 2023. It's the same old credit trap, just this time with a better user interface. So while headlines keep celebrating that consumer spending remains strong, the reality is people are financing their day-to-day survival one installment plan at a time. And when you start to look at the American economy from a debt-first perspective, everything starts to look a whole lot different. It doesn't look like the booming economy everyone's talking about on CNBC. It looks more like a giant game of hot potato where everyone's hoping the music doesn't stop. Every record-high stock market headline, every flashy consumer spending report, it's all built on borrowed money. Because the truth is, America isn't saving for the future, it's financing the present. And that's what makes the credit crisis so dangerous. It's not loud, it's not sudden, and it's not dramatic. It's quiet, it's gradual, and it's happening in plain sight. So yeah, everything appears to be fine on the surface. The markets are high, inflation's easing, and unemployment's low. But underneath, the foundation's beginning to crack. Because this is America, a country that's surviving on debt.